Hello and welcome to the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast here on hawkfanatic.com. If you hear some ruckus in the background, it's WrestleMania time for our dogs. So hopefully they get through the match quickly and it doesn't interrupt the Hotspot podcast. But it's been a crazy week since we've last met, Scott, anyway. So having dogs wrestle in the background seems kind of appropriate.
Yeah, I think so, Rob. I think right now anything would be appropriate, from an earthquake to dogs deciding to get up and walk around and shake hands with one another. So
we are now, as it is Thursday, January the 25th, a little after 9 a.m. Central Time, and still without an offensive coordinator, at least publicly. We have not heard who that is for Iowa football. So going on the 3-month mark, if you go back to October 30th. So we'll see if something drops the next couple days. Beth Getz had her introductory press conference on Tuesday. I think she used the term short order in terms of an offensive coordinator being named. So hopefully that means sometime this week, Scott.
Yeah, I think it might be by this weekend at some point, probably in the middle of one of the championship games on Sunday. It'll be announced or leaked. Let's just do it at the most inconvenient time. But I wouldn't even care if it was like 4 o'clock on Friday. Let's get it done. That sort of thing. Sunday, I might have a problem with, but largely, I had one person reach out kind of on the inside, say we're pretty close on this. So I would expect it, next week, Rob, that we might be able to have a conversation about this.
I hope so.
I think that would probably be beneficial for everyone. We can all move forward and discuss what this person may or may not bring to the offense. Fans can pan it or celebrate it. I imagine there'll be a mixture of both. It doesn't matter if it was Kyle Shanahan deciding to resign before the Super Bowl, if he takes the Niners there and say, I just couldn't pass up this opportunity to coach Iowa's offense instead of taking the 49ers to the Super Bowl. But
whoever can rebuild the Iowa offense becomes an instant an instant college football Hall of Famer.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, let's say just keep the Broyles trophy in the same building, just replace the name on it, right?
Yeah, it's and I've kind of maintained this. Gets frustrating. I get that fans are antsy. They want to know. They want to react, really, right? That's what people want to do. They want to get on social media, interact with each other, react, fight about whether the hire is good or not, as Scott said. But to me, the length of the search isn't as important as getting it right. Just get it right. Whoever it is needs to be the right pick, because really, Scott, this will complete Kirk Ferentz's legacy, right? Whoever comes in here and whatever it is, whatever he is able to do with this offense will define the final years of Kirk Ferentz's tenure here. You hope.
No question, because with a new look Big Ten, and you're adding 3 quality programs, and then UCLA as well, which I think has the potential to be. But you're adding programs that are at minimum and most likely higher standard than you are. I think you're going to need somebody who can go in, and you can't win every game 10-7. You can't win on a last-second field goal. You're going to lose by more than just an overturned punt return. You're going to need to score points. And the offense has been an issue for a long time, and it needs to be corrected. And whoever comes in, and if Kirk can maintain, the number of wins, it'll probably be against a higher caliber of opponent over however the rest of his career is, then he's got a case to be the best ever. I know fans kind of back and forth depending on the year argue about him and Hayden, but we remember the end of the Hayden era. From after 91, from 92 to 98, it was pretty mediocre. There were 2 or 3 years where they didn't win, didn't go to a bowl game. There was only 1 year where they won 9. So it was just, I think, but Kirk, is what, their 10th in Power 5 wins in the last 6 years. That's pretty impressive. So I think if he can complete that, get an offense off the ground, off the mat, and can at least complement its defense, at least for this year, I think then you look at this team and frankly, I'm doing this Big Ten thing on the transfer portal for tomorrow, and I think Iowa's got a case to, if its offense can be decent, it's got a case to where it can get to Indianapolis. Ohio State is clearly the best team, but with Michigan now losing its coach, with Washington losing its coach, Oregon's got to play across the country. They got to play some really good teams. They got to play both Michigan and Ohio State and Washington. I think Iowa's got an opportunity there, but that said, you got to get it done too, and you got to find the right fit. And I think finding the right fit is more important than if it's done January 25th or February 1st.
Yeah, no doubt. And to the Hayden Fry, Kirk Ferentz debate or comparison, it's always been hard for me to compare errors.
Mm-hmm.
The landscape's so much different now than it was, not only when Hayden started, but then when Hayden was finished and when Kirk started to where it is now. There's just been, because they've coached for so long that just everything changes so much. The landscape changes so much, but both have done a fabulous job with the program and kept it competitive for, half a century. So that's pretty impressive. And we'll see what happens here. We'll see. A lot of unanswered questions on what the new Big Ten is going to look like, how this all is going to play out, travel, how that impacts the new, expansion of college football playoff. There's so much that's changing. The NIL constantly, we see the NCAA in court, all this stuff. You get the feeling that there's still a lot more to this story, and we'll see how it plays out. I will say this: if you're looking for somebody to keep your secret, Kirk Ferentz is probably the man for the job, because there's been so much more speculation and rumor than actual concrete information in this search. I'm not sure how much he's telling people in the building, let alone, people outside the building. So that's a good way, to me, that's a good way to approach this. It takes away, well, they could have had this guy or they could have had that guy. And that you can't live like that. You have to, again, pick who you want to pick who you think is going to be the best for the job, and then move forward with that. And hopefully that's the case here. Obviously Beth has some type of, she's obviously in charge of the money. So she has to know kind of that part of it and who it is and if whoever it is worthy of whatever salary they come up with. Sorry about that. But I guess just generally transitioning to her introductory press conference, Scott, what did you take out of that maybe you had, because you've interacted with her quite a bit since she's gotten here, and especially since she went into the interim position. Any more insight you got out of that press conference on Tuesday that maybe you didn't know before?
Not necessarily, because it was kind of her introduction to everybody, not to the public. I mean, it was on BTN, it was on Hawkeye Sports Live. There were hundreds of people there. The student athletes had lined up and to welcome her, and I think this was an introduction to her to the rest of the people. I think I want to know specifics about certain projects. I want to know priorities and not just take care of student athletes. In fact, I kind of mentioned that, but she was also really good at answering and I think there is a level of uncertainty that she has, that everybody has, regarding the NCAA. I mean, at some point, athletes are going to get paid by schools. It's just going to happen. And at some point, wouldn't even be surprised if this is the week where the groundwork is laid, that there's going to be a secession from the NCAA, or at least a new governance structure, maybe for Power Five football, maybe for the entire power structure of conference play. And so within that, it's hard for her to gauge kind of what path I was going to have to take. But what I did like about how she responded was that she's going to plan for whatever contingency that she needs to, and Iowa will be very competitive and at the forefront of whatever it needs to happen. And I think that's something that Iowa has lacked for a while. There was a lot that I did like about Gary Barta, and I know people really poo-pooed him, especially at the end of his career and throughout for some of the lawsuits, and some of it was his fault, some of it wasn't. But I do think that Gary, just being naturally a little more conservative, was more reactive to the landscape and to the issues coming up, whereas Beth is much more progressive and thinking forward on these topics, and understands the environment and understands Iowa has to get to the front, not just get kind of dragged from the back, which is kind of what had happened all these years. I mean, having conversations with Gary like 10 years ago, and he didn't want any part of the NIL. He didn't want any part of all these different things, and then grudgingly, and then he accepted it. But now it's like, well, all right, we're going to be in the leadership chair, and that hasn't happened at Iowa for a while, and I think that's a really good thing.
Yeah, no doubt. And Gary really did fight the NIL to the end. Did not want to be involved with the swarm, and that could have been because he knew he was coming to the end of his tenure anyway, and figured he'd just go out the way he would go out, and figured Beth would pick it up. And she seems to have a good relationship with Brad Heinrichs and the swarm, so that's a good deal. But it'll be interesting to see, like you said, what the structure is, because it's so wonky now with these collectives, and where's the money coming from and who gets what. You can streamline it a lot more if the universities and the NCAA or whatever governing body said, as long as they don't try to screw the student athletes over again, because then you're just going to end up in court and there's going to be a problem again anyway. As long as they just get to the table and figure this out, to how student athletes can make money through the university, be given money through the university for playing, then I think that works. And it seems like that's what she realizes. So if you accept that as a possibility, you can prepare for it.
Yeah, I think so. And the one thing that I think I've found, and I'm sure you have too, is that that Beth has a huge backing right now at Iowa, and this is a honeymoon period for her, no question. She's not to say that she can't do wrong, but she's got enough people in her corner supporting her that she's had to make one hellaciously tough decision. But I think most people in the building too would agree with her on that one. But outside of that, we saw, all the athletes there. She's got almost universal support among the coaches at all levels, the money makers and the highest profile to the Olympic sports that don't get any kind of traction at all. So I think overall, she's got the clout she needs, and she's got the position now, and she's got the mandate to go forward. And as far as priorities go, though, Rob, it's kind of strange. When you look internally, what would you put as numbers, say 1, 2, and 3? I mean, for me, I think she's got to have lists of potential succession plans, because when you have the 3 winningest coaches in your 3 most visible sports, and they're all in their 60s, and it wouldn't surprise any of us if one or even all, one of them would step down sometime this year, and a couple others maybe within the next 3 to 5 years. You've got to have that, because if you don't have those 3 programs, in particular football, but those 3 programs at a high level, I think you're really in deep trouble. So
yeah, and I think we just witnessed the madness this offseason when Saban retired, and all the dominoes that fell. So it's not going to be to that extent, because Iowa's not Alabama, but you got to be prepared for that. You can't be trying to play catch up there in filling Kirk Ferentz's seat. And the same with Fran McCaffrey and Lisa Bluter. Is Jan Jensen the successor there? I mean, you have to figure that out. Is there somebody on Fran's staff that you're interested in, or you're looking outside? That's all. And you don't have to dig in 10 feet deep, but you have to start digging at this point and start putting together, like you said, a succession plan.
Yeah. And I mean, I think, as you said, Saban, it kind of came out of nowhere, but it makes perfect sense. I mean, he's 71 years old. Kirk right now is he'll be 69 in August.
Yeah.
He's the dean of coaches and has been for a few years. And at some point it's going to happen. I mean, Hayden was 70, I think, when he stepped aside. And so I think that's really the, what we're dealing with something like that, when look at, as you said, the dominoes, when you've got, when you got Alabama going down with Saban, they take a national championship runner-up coach from Washington, who then takes one from Arizona, who then takes one from San Jose State. And then that's just the dominoes there. And then you talk about all the assistants that now are out and about, and where are they going to go? Are they going to end up at this place or that place? Then, if you have a couple of openings, then all that really shakes out. I mean, Michigan now, maybe they just promote Sharon Moore, which I would guess would be the case. But what if they don't? What if they hire Matt Campbell? I'm not saying that's going to happen, but
you're starting trouble.
No, all right, let's erase that. Let's just not even go there. Brett Bielema, no, I don't go there either. But no, it's just I think overall, if we want to, if things can happen very quickly, as we know, and you've got to be prepared. And what happens if Black Friday's Kirk Ferentz's last game is, or he announces retirement after that and coaches in the bowl or something like that. You've got to be ready, because you got to be ready to strike. And we know one thing about University of Iowa, and the OC process is one thing, but the AD search is another. It shows you that there is a heavy ass level of bureaucracy attached to anything at Iowa, and you cannot afford to be behind, because now they incredibly lucked out back in '98 when they hired Kirk over, but what happens if Kirk was, the 2-18 start would have been kind of over that period for the next 5 years, and they had to fire him and start all over again? Then it all will point back to, why didn't you hire Stoops to begin with? And so they've got to be positioned well enough to know who to go for, who to target, and how to expedite that process. And I think it's the same thing as the case with basketball, because I think we could see maybe that end coming even quicker.
Yeah, and that was a few folks asked about that on Tuesday with Beth as well. The Carver Hawkeye Arena question. You have a story out about the attendance there. We were both there last night. It was not good. If you're comparing the two, football and men's basketball, how many false starts do you see at Kinnick Stadium as a result of crowd noise and the fan support, and how much of a factor Kinnick Stadium is in helping Iowa perform? Basketball's not getting that right now. In a game last night where it came down to the end, there was not crowd noise. There was not anything that rattled Maryland. It was like it was a walk in the park for them, and that's an issue. And what does she do there? And when you tweeted your story the other day, and I tweeted the Groundhog Day, Bill Murray smashing the alarm clock, that wasn't a knock on your story. That was a knock on, shit, man, I've been hearing this for going on 30 years. What's the problem with the attendance at Carver Hawkeye Arena? If she can figure that out, that I'm really impressed.
Yeah, I mean, figuring out Carver and men's basketball is kind of almost like figuring out Iowa's football offense. I mean, it's the same, it's the same level of difficulty here. And we've going back to our days on Good Call with Brett Balbinot and on 800. This is an issue now that's, to me, more perplexing than it was then, and more serious, because back in the late aughts, or whatever we call it, performance truly was an issue. They were the worst team in the Big Ten or close to it under Todd Licklider. Now, okay, they're having a little bit of a down year, no question. They're losing some close games, but they've got some players. I really like this roster. I don't think they're probably not going to end up in the NCAA, but I think they're going to have a streak coming up. But overall, there's a lot to like here. And in the past, and when I mean past, I mean Tom Davis errors, whatever. I think people still would have supported this team, but now you're looking at like the attendance last night was 8,500, and that was listed, and there was probably
that's tickets sold, right?
That's tickets sold. So my guess is, Rob, last night there were probably 6,000, 65.
I'm bad at those guesstimates on, but it was. I classify it as decent, really good, like Purdue, and then bad. Last night was bad. A conference game on a 6 o'clock in a midweek. I don't know why people can't get to the weather. Wasn't bad.
Yeah, right. You're able to park, all that kind of stuff. So, there are reasons and there are excuses, and they all get kind of flushed down the same toilet in some ways when it comes to this era. But it's true. I mean, people complain about the start times. Is it 6 o'clock? Well, that's too early. Can't get off work in time. If it's 8 o'clock, well, I got to go to work the next day. And I live too far. Those are understandable, but they are reasons / excuses. Are the team's not good enough? I don't know about that. That's kind of fake to me. But what is it? Does the arena suck? Or, well, why is it full for the women and why is it full for wrestling every time? And it's loud and it's intense and it's one of the best environments in sports and those two sports. But for men's basketball, it's like going to a bad church service, And so, I know I was walking around with Chad Leistico last night around the upper level and just kind of walking, and I'm like, looking at the different food options and stuff. And that's one small aspect. But I'm like, okay, do I want to get the nachos or the hot dogs? Well, they have ice cream cones, but the line is freaking astronomical. Okay, we go over there and get those Franderloins or whatever. That's not exactly good. It's just different. I'm like, the options you can get at these places, this is just stupid. It's like, man, bid this out. Get somebody in there who can, jazz it up a little bit. They've got all this construction going on with the wrestling facility, which is a disaster as far as getting around. But as far as I don't know. I mean, Rob, we could probably have an entire podcast or two dedicated to all the issues there. But I think there are certain things that you have to write down and point at as
it starts relevant. With moving the students, right?
I think that's a big factor. I mean, last night there's probably 50 students, maybe.
So what's keeping them away? I think that's the first study. How do you get them to come to the basketball games? I was mentioning to you last night that some of the promotions that I was watching Michigan at Purdue the other night. Was it Tuesday night? And I mean, it's like a really like mundane part of the game with a Michigan shooting foul shots, and I'm hearing the students getting riled up. And Mackey's a different world. That's if you can get it to Mackey level, more power to you. But the promotion is some local chicken joint there gives the students free chicken sandwiches the next day if somebody on the opposing team misses 2 consecutive foul shots and 1 trip to the line. And the Michigan guy missed the first foul shot. Students were going nuts. He makes the second. They're booing him. I mean, it's small, but it's something that gets them into the game. It's something that, hey, you going to the game tonight? Maybe we'll get free chicken sandwiches. Is it going to get everybody there? No, but it's a carrot. It's an enticement. Things like that need to happen. Pizzas, bring pizzas, put them down there and let them have pizza. Whatever it takes to get them in there. But I think you have to move them. I think that would be the biggest selling point. Hey, you could come and just light them up behind the bench. Light the other team up. Just put them behind the bench and you can yell the whole game.
Yeah, that's one part of it, and I know talking to, it's weird. For my story, I decided I wanted to talk to a student who has student season tickets, and I wanted to talk to somebody who's had season tickets, and in this case, turned out since 1969, and he's always there, and the students there, been a fan since the day he was born, and get their perspectives, and like the student was like, I think more fans should show up, or I think more students should show up, but they don't want to be up in the rafters, if they're here. And then, so but there's a fear from like the old season ticket holders, like, well, if I got to move my seat, I want to make sure that they do come. I don't want them to come, to have all these great seats, and then all of a sudden, I can get moved out of mine, and next thing you know, it's half full or it's not full. It's like what it was last night. And it's like, well, then there's the transportation angle. A lot of students say, look, getting there is pretty hard. And it is. It's kind of a weird area. It's not real easy to get to. There's not, the parking is all over the place. It's not, that's a factor and a reason, and it's an excuse. But if it's like, that's the thing, the customer is always right when it comes to this and how they want to spend their money and where they want to spend their time. And it's like, I don't know, I'm not how do you make people interested in it? And I think overall, Rob, the difference between now and even 25 years ago is that the emotional attachment is gone with the program. And how do you get that back? It's ground floor. And we could say it's the coach's fault, but the attachment from the coach to the fan, the average fan, is not there. It's not as strong as it needs to be. I'm not saying Fran's a bad coach. In fact, I think he's a pretty good coach, but he's recruited, I've had people arguing all since I posted that story about whether he's a good recruiter or a bad recruiter. I look at it as he recruits as well as anybody at Iowa could recruit, and he develops really well. And then there's the NCAA tournament factor. And I think that ending the year on a positive note is something this program has struggled with. And it's not just getting to the Sweet 16. It's when you have a team capable of getting there and capable of going farther and then falling way short. It's like people get their hopes up, and then it's like, how much longer do you go? You know what? I don't want to get my heart broken again, and so you throw all of this into the mix, and the fact that 97 teams have reached the Sweet 16 since Iowa's last trip there. And, is it a fun environment? Do you have fun when you go there? And I can honestly say I would not have fun when I go there, because I just think that the atmosphere, it's the same as it always was. Here's a sign, game today, come on in, go Hawks.
They're trying. I mean, they brought the DJ in a few years ago. That didn't do anything. I saw last night they were trying to promote everybody stand up till Iowa scores the first basket to try to get people like into this togetherness of being, cheering together. All of those things are fine. If they make the Sweet 16, yeah, that probably gives you a bump the next year, but how long is it going to last? You need something that can sustain, Scott. It's not just one trip to March. As you said, are they excuses or reasons? It's too late at night. The weather's bad. The concessions aren't good. It's too hard to get to the bathroom. You got to take all of the reasons. Are the students don't have the seats that they want? Is that why they're not coming, or where they won't, or like the longtime season ticket holder told you, is moving them going to help, or are they still not going to come? And then you have empty seats behind the back. It's going to take, and Beth talked about the studies that they're doing, and hopefully they get the results and choose the right things to address to help this sustain over time. I think she mentioned premium seating, so that's definitely on. So I don't know what they're going to do with that, but I think you have to if you're gonna wine and dine the big rollers, you also have to take care of average Joe as well, right?
Yeah, you've got to figure out, the arena itself, I think no matter what happens with wrestling or women's basketball, I think we all understand that women's basketball has a phenomenon now that has never happened before and will never happen again. I mean, it's just it's in a rare spot.
And
However,
wrestling is I want to say
yeah,
niche because I think that sells it so short, but those are really passionate, focused fans on that sport. And how
yeah,
many home duels are
there's what, like 8, something like that,
there
and
compared to how many home basketball games? Twice as
yeah,
much? Twice
right.
as much?
And here's the difference too with that, Rob, is that now that they wrestle Friday nights and Sundays,
Yeah.
sometimes on Saturdays. So it's a more convenient
Yeah.
opportunity to go see those duels. And so when you look at basketball, I mean, one of the things that has been discussed, and they do have that feasibility study, and they got to figure out how to pay for it, because you also got to pay for an OC and your your
Yeah.
head coaches and everything like that. But is how do you put it together to give you that advantage? And it's probably going to be a smaller arena, and it probably be cut by 20%, say to 12.5. And that wouldn't be the worst thing, because as we see, everything kind of fans out. There's no concourse, so it's hard to get to the restroom and get food, especially the people in the best seats have the longest walk to make to go get an ice cream cone or go get a hot dog or nachos or whatever.
And you don't want to spend time online for the bathroom or food
Yeah.
and miss the game.
Right. And at halftime, it's just an astronomical thing. And again, if you're elderly or if you're, a big fan, walking up those steps is not easy. It takes something out of you. And yes, I know some of the people who are in shape going, oh, well, okay, so you're going to tell them just don't come.
Yeah.
That's the problem all along. You need to make things easier, not more difficult, and maybe that's an escalator or two, maybe that's more elevators and more access to restrooms, all those types of things. But one idea I thought was have like a hawk's perch or beak, and like the opposite from where the wrestling facility entrance will be on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine if you had like two almost like triangles, and you had, like, say, a glassed in suites underneath that area, where that's where your rich donors could be for these games, that they're glassed in, they get to see everything, and then you can open the window or whatever, and then maybe on top of it have it like a slope. That's your sitting area. That's for your people who are like the longtime season ticket holder and that, which this is mainly a sitting area. You come, it's comfortable, you pay a little more, but you don't have to worry about the guy who shows up once a year who wants to stand the whole time. But that's a sitting area. Then find standing areas, because I hear that, we probably hear that more from people, which is, I'm standing up cheering this team, and then all of a sudden behind me, somebody's like, hey man, I'm trying to watch the game. You need to kind of this is unique to Iowa. You need to get a happy balance. Then, probably bring it all in a little tighter. So
there's a lot of room around the court too.
Yeah,
I think isn't being used properly.
Exactly. I mean, it's so weird because it's the opposite of Kinnick.
Right.
Kinnick is so close. I mean, I think the stands are closer to the football field at Kinnick than the stands are to the basketball.
I think you're right.
Yeah. So, you have all this, that environment. And I don't know. I mean, I'm just talking out of my butt here on this, but honestly, it's just, there's just so much that needs.
Is there a reason why they don't have people selling concessions in the stands?
I've asked, and everybody's like, oh yeah. And then just never really, I haven't really asked pointedly. It's been more conversationally, and nobody's really ever responded to that.
The only thing I could think of is the concession people would be in the way. Like, it'd be the same concept of people standing up in front of you and you're missing the game because somebody's standing there. But I mean, that happens at stadiums all over the country.
Well, we've been to baseball stadiums, MLB. That's exactly what they do, and you can kind of go like this for 2 minutes or 30 seconds,
or big screen, whatever.
Yeah.
Look at the jumbotron.
And they do it. The thing is, they do it at Ohio State. That's the one where I've seen it. We're kind of up at an angle, and you look over, and they're walking around with big sodas or popcorn or peanuts or whatever, and you can do that. I don't know if you want to do it with beer, maybe you do, I don't know, but it's more convenient. It means fans don't have to go up there to travel, and if you have more restrooms available, that's also part of it. And so overall, the experience isn't for too many people, the experience isn't worth the hassle. And what you've got to do is flip it. Like with women's basketball, it's a phenomenon. I get it, but the attachment that the community, the Iowa basketball community, and has with Lisa Bluter and Jan Jensen and the players is top notch. I mean, you look around on a game day, it's not just Caitlin Clark jerseys. It's happy like Hannah. It's grit like Gabby. It's the glue, Kate Martin. I mean, people are wearing shirts left and right. Molly Davis's headband. It's everywhere, and they feel such an attachment, like they're part of almost their family. And it was kind of that way with men's basketball way back in the day, and it's just not. And and this isn't a wrong thing, but Fran doesn't necessarily bring in a lot of the fans that way. You don't see him going over and taking pictures with the students and regular fans a lot of times. I mean, he's got people he's very close to and people who swear by him. But, and that's just his personality. And if you're winning, nobody cares. But if you're not, you don't see him over there, hey, giving high fives to the students and stuff like that. And so some of that attachment kind of fades, and then people will kind of, well, I take them or leave them. And apathy is the worst possible thing you can have as a program. I mean, at least with football, people are mad,
Yeah.
Because if they're not mad and they're not coming, then you're in treacherous territory.
Yeah. And it's a complicated puzzle. It's much more complicated, I think, in basketball. And we've talked about it before. Football is an event. It's on the weekend during the fall. It's a social event. You're with your family, you're with your friends. It's the tailgating. Basketball is much more. It starts the beginning of November and runs through April. It's a much longer season. It's a much more complicated puzzle, I think. And I didn't agree with much of what Steve Alford did or said when he was here, but he left and called Iowa football school. And at this point it is. But you have to be able to carve out, a following for your other main revenue sport, which is men's basketball.
You have to. And of course, Steve was right, but it was also his fault.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, and I think they're still paying for the peer-to-peer stuff.
Absolutely, they are. Because remember the first 3 years, I think it was, that he was here, it was every game was sold out. They hired him to get to the next level. And peer-to-peer situation, what it did was it removed a sizable segment of fan base that was either turned off by it or average fan that and they're like, I'm not interested in this. This is bullshit. And then when it happened again a couple of years later, then it was like, are you kidding me? And then so then everybody soured on Alford, and then the Licklider's first year. I'm not going to criticize Lick necessarily on this, but he lost some good players. No more Adam Haluska. He went to the NBA. No more Tyler Smith, I think it was. He left, and they didn't have the collection that you'd probably want. It was a bad winter as far as weather goes, and then there was BTN, so the games were all on BTN, and Mediacom didn't show it. He didn't have that charisma or personality that really carries the room in any regard. and so it's like, well, they're not very good and we can't watch them anyway. And the weather's bad, so I don't really have any interest in going. So he comes out of sight, out of mind. And Fran did revive that, no question. He got him to a point where, probably 4 or 5 years in, where it was back to being really pretty good. And then it's just kind of, again, plateaued is probably the best way to describe it. And the passionate fans have been kind of upset that they can't get to the next level. The I won't say fair weather fans, but I'd say the modest fans are kind of like, whatever, take it or leave it. I got other things to do. And what reason other than support your team have they given people to come? as you said, there's no chicken sandwiches or, I mean, as much as they give Pancheros, Pancheros could say, hey, if we hit 100 or if we hit 90 or if somebody, not Caitlin
certain
Clark,
amount of 3-pointers.
Yeah, exactly. It's like if, let's say based on percentage, like if Peyton gives Peyton Sanford an NIL deal with Pancheros, and if he hits 25 points, then that's 25% off your entire meal at Pancheros for the next 3 days or something like that. And I think that would kind of energize people, even though it's, a couple bucks, maybe a little more than $5, but it's still something. I don't know, but otherwise, we're talking about the same issues we did when we were less gray,
Exactly.
and sitting at the Iowa River Power Restaurant in 2009.
Yeah, it's ongoing, and like I said, if Beth can figure this one out and get men's basketball back or make it a must-see event, most nights you're going to have the crappy, directional Florida or directional whatever schools, and that's going to be tough during Christmas break and stuff. And you bake that in when you're doing budgets and things like that, but a 6 o'clock game on a Wednesday night against a Big Ten team like last night should not be like that. That is alarming and something that needs to be addressed. And she said she's going to do that. We'll see. We'll see what type of ideas and the feasibility study kicks out and where that goes from there. It's probably a good time to take a break, and Scott and I'll come back on the other side and talk about last night's game a little bit and what went right, what went wrong. And kind of look ahead a little bit, and then catch up on women's basketball. Iowa got a big, large human being to transfer from Alabama that we haven't talked about yet. So we'll come back and talk about that. Want to let folks know that support for the podcast comes from Systems Unlimited, celebrating 50 years of providing services to people living with disabilities and mental health needs throughout East Central Iowa. A list of their services and upcoming events can be found at SUI.org. That is SUI.org. Thank you to Systems Unlimited, over half a century of helping people in East Central Iowa, and we certainly appreciate their support of the podcast. We also appreciate the folks you're going to hear from next. Scott and I'll be back on the other side of this short break. Hang in there. Thank you to the sponsors once again. Thank you for listening to the Hotspot podcast. I'm Rob Howell, joined by Scott Docterman from The Athletic. We're back to talk about last night's 69-67 loss to Maryland. And I think that final score, Scott, is pretty telling. That was a Maryland team that was able to dictate tempo and pace and get Iowa into its game, and pulled it out at the end by being by the best player on the court making a play at the end of the game, and that being Jameer Young, who just was incredible in the second half after Josh Dix and Tony Perkins slowed him down quite a bit in the first half, and it was kind of his play in the second half that I think was the difference, and that's not breaking news or anything like that, but a lot of layers to this one. I think Iowa missed some opportunities to maybe extend the lead a little bit more at times, but in the end, it was one of those nights where when you have contrasting styles or teams that like to play at different paces, Maryland was able to do that, and you gotta ding Iowa for allowing that to happen.
You're in your own building. You are the number one scoring team in the Big Ten. They're the number one scoring defense in the Big Ten. This is where your tempo at your pace in your environment should be paramount. Now we just spent 45 minutes talking about the environment, so we don't need to go there anymore. But I think, Iowa was able to fight through that much of the time. But then in about the last 5 minutes of the game, for whatever reason, it couldn't really score. And that was really tough for them. I mean, it was just a grind. And now they were able to get to the free throw line, but they still had shots and they didn't make them. And as you said, Jameer Young really took that game over in the last few minutes. I mean, I think it was at one point it was like 63-57, and Iowa was kind of in control, and yet they were able to really force it. And then Iowa in the second half hit only 33%. That's not good for Iowa. I mean, whereas Maryland hit 54%. So this is a really tough loss in the big picture, Rob, because they dropped to 3 and 5, but Maryland and Iowa are kind of in that same tier. And both of them are kind of bubble-ish teams, bubble-licious, and losing at home to a team like that is really difficult.
Yeah, that was one of those swing games that you really need to have. Now you've got to make up for that with probably an upset on the road, or multiple upsets at home. You've already played Purdue twice, so the opportunity there, although a long shot to be able to beat a Purdue team as we saw on Saturday, with a distinctive size advantage. And last night, I don't know if they underestimated Julian Reese's shot blocking ability or thought that they could, but he ended up, I think, with 5 or 6 blocks where guys weren't shot faking or head faking or realizing he was there and being, kicking the ball back out. Just some questionable decisions just on that end of the floor. And then, has been a complaint about Fran McCaffrey's program on defense, some defensive breakdowns at the end. Brock Harding going under a screen on Jameer Young's late 3-pointer, and then the breakdown at the end when Jameer basically drove to the basket and his strong hand and had a layup. So certainly this team has made a lot of strides since the beginning of the year. I think it's more connected on both ends of the floor, but just more room to grow. And it's kind of a wait and see for me to see how much, if at all, this team can improve and be more competitive, particularly on the road against better teams.
Yeah. Well, this is the tough spot because they are basically a young team. They are a team that's strengthened. Now they've got some veterans, but they're still learning how to work together in crunch time. And there's going to be a lot of these types of games for them. And, getting Owen Freeman fouling out was a big deal. Tony Perkins played his ass off as always. And really, 11-11 from the free throw line was awesome for him. I thought he was really good. But Patrick McCaffrey was only able to give him 9 minutes, off the bench, and as he's still fighting through a foot issue or ankle issue. Ben Krikke wasn't quite himself. He's 3 of 11 from the field, 9 points. It's just I think the hallmark is kind of what happened when we saw at the end, that whether it was there needed to be either a switch or replace or whatever, when Jameer Young drove on Peyton Sandfort and was able to get up strong with that layup with 1.5 seconds left. That's like the last shot you want him to have. You want him to take a jumper if he's going to take something.
Yeah.
And they got to be more careful with that. And then to watch, I am so impressed, and I really like the way Peyton Sandfort competes. Last night he was in tears. He was just distraught for losing. He's very vocal on the floor. He's somebody that could play in any era for Iowa basketball. It's just there needs to be a little bit more. And when you got younger guys that are working their way through. It's a process. I think this team's getting better, but the competition's not getting worse. You're not going to have any layups necessarily coming up. So it's going to be a grind the rest of the way. I'm not saying that they can't win half their games the rest of the way. I'm just saying it's going to be a tough fight each and every night.
Yeah, no doubt. It's a very balanced league. I think we saw Saturday that Purdue is, I think, clearly the best team. I think Wisconsin obviously has won some tough games, and you look at a Wisconsin team that's had some really tough games that have come down to the wire, and the Badgers have been able to pull those out, and that's the difference between them and some other teams in the league. And when the competition is that close and there's parity, that's what separates teams. And we're watching Northwestern that's proving to be really tough at home. And again, we spent a large part of this podcast on home environments. Check out what Northwestern is doing in their arena, in their newer arena, the student involvement, all of that. Again, not to get back to that discussion, but there are teams that are figuring out ways to win, and forming identities. And I'm not sure that this Iowa team really has an identity yet. And I think that's that's not unexpected with what you said, Scott, with, blending veteran guys who are in new roles and bigger roles with new guys, even a Ben Krikke that's trying to figure it out. And that was kind of the hand they were dealt at the beginning. And I think they have played the hand pretty well to this point. But you just don't have time. You're in the Big Ten season now. You got to go. And I'm not sure if this team's able to go yet. And we'll find that out moving forward.
It's, I know the comparison is apt, that it reminds a lot of people of what we saw. And I'm sorry, I'm just grabbing the schedule, but it is really comparable to what we saw in the 2017 season. Now, will it fall apart the way that one did? I don't know. I hope not. That one lost some close games and then it kind of went kaput, but then it got it back up, for the next year. But I do think that, I think they're searching for their on-court leader. I think Perkins to some extent is that way. He's not a pure scorer. He's a tough dude who gets his points, but I think he'd benefit from, you've had the Murray brothers and you've had Garza and Bohannon and, Tyler Cook before that. And, you've always had somebody who kind of stands out as being your guy. And I don't know that they have that right now. And maybe, it's got to be organic. I think Owen Freeman will be that guy.
I agree.
But he's not that guy yet. I think Josh Dix has the capability of being that guy, but he's not that guy yet. And then, Perkins is a different kind of scorer. Krikke is, I think, if he had a really good guard with him that could pull up and shoot, and Sanford kind of fits that from time to time. It's just, I think they've got a lot of really good pieces, but I don't see them, okay, we need to go get a bucket. There's the guy to go do it.
Yeah, and from that leadership perspective that you talked about, Scott, it's like I think Tony's more of a lead by example type than a vocal leader.
Yeah,
and that, like you said, it's kind of got to be organic. And I think Peyton can be that at times, but then he kind of gets down on himself if his shot's not falling. And then when you're down on yourself, it's tough to lead others sometimes. And before they go into the locker room, before opening tip, like the last warm up, they huddle.
Yeah.
Or in the basket. And that's where, for the last few years, Connor McCaffrey was in the middle of that huddle getting them going. Last night, I noticed it was Patrick McCaffrey doing it. I don't know if that's been the case all year, but I think that speaks to, and it's not a knock on Tony or Peyton or Patrick. I just don't know if any of the three is a natural, and it's not easy. I mean, Connor McCaffrey was good because of the natural, organic way he approached the game. And I'm just not sure. I agree with you. It's a little like 2017 where they didn't really have that. And then Luka emerged as that as the years went on. And I think you may get that from Owen and maybe even a Brock Harding and a Josh Dix. It's
Yeah.
just a little early for that in their careers.
Right. And I think Peyton can be that guy if he just levels out, his emotions, because he does wear them on his sleeve. And if he misses a couple of shots and it's not hitting, then he kind of flips the other way. And that's not what you want from somebody who is going to be your leader, because everybody feeds off of you. On the court, he is, he's got it, but once it goes the other way, it's really a struggle. It's just, I look at this team, Rob, and I all is not lost on the floor when, they got to go to Michigan and then they got to go to Indiana. Those are winnable games. They're on the road. Michigan beat you at home in probably your worst performance of the year, in my opinion. And then Indiana certainly is beatable, and Iowa's had some really good, easy games there over the years. Ohio State at home on Groundhog Day. They'll have opportunity there. I mean, I think that's Ohio State's good, but they're in the same ballpark as Iowa. They're not. It's not two different levels. At Penn State, you want to talk about work? That place is the worst in the Big Ten. It's that close.
Yeah, don't do any research at Penn State at the Bryce Jordan Center to fix the ills at Carver Hawkeye Arena attendance, because you won't find any answers there.
No, it's different. But then they got Minnesota at home, and then they're at Maryland. I mean, so that's a stretch where I look at it, a 6-game stretch. It would not surprise me at all if Iowa goes 4-2 or 5-1. They're very capable of that. But they're also, all these teams are in the same jug. It depends on which glass you get when you pour it. They could go 2-4 or 1-5, and then the season's completely kaput. And then they get into the, if let's say they have a nice run, they go 5-1 or something. Then you got Wisconsin at home, and it doesn't. As good as Wisconsin is, I don't think Wisconsin's unbeatable. I think Purdue is the best, as you said, but Purdue is beatable, but I don't know why Iowa beatable. But if they're falling apart, then you got back-to-back games at Michigan State and Illinois. Michigan State's not very good right now, but they're still Michigan State at the Breslin Center. Illinois, tough place to play. It has been, I don't know, the whole time Iowa and Illinois have ever played historically for a century. And then your last road trips to Evanston, it's not easy. So I think this 6-game stretch is going to tell us everything we want about this year's team. If they can get through it and navigate it in decent fashion, I don't know if they're an NCAA team, but I think they could compete enough to maybe put themselves in NIT conversation. But if they fall apart, then we are looking at 2017, because the last handful of games are not going to be easy. And then you get in the Big Ten tournament, and you might be an 11 seed or playing the first day.
Yeah, and it's important to note that the NIT structure is different this year too. It's not, they don't have to reward smaller conference champions. They have a due structure there that makes it, they can pick the schools they want, so to speak. So that would help a school like Iowa. You want to get back on the court as soon as possible after a game like that. Obviously, Saturday at Michigan, we'll see if they can bounce back then. And we'll also see, Scott, if the Iowa women can bounce back this Saturday. Home game, Nebraska, 1 o'clock, Carver Hawkeye Arena, coming off their first loss since before Thanksgiving, and only their second loss of the season. It was incredibly entertaining game Sunday in Columbus. We have the other storylines of the court storm and the collision, and with Caitlin Clark going down and all that. But we've talked about, maybe where there are soft spots or what type of scenarios can give Iowa trouble. And the 2 losses this year, it's been an opposing post player having a dominant game that Iowa's lost.
Yeah, and they had and this is probably something, I think in their case, they can definitely learn from these experiences, but also, when you're up, 12 points was it in the fourth quarter and fall and lose? That's not
a good feeling, no matter where you are. And yeah, I mean, Ohio State had the time of their life, coming back, but it does expose you. It exposes you. Why did that happen? What can you do to change that in the future? And I think that's something that Iowa has definitely got to be much more cognizant of. That's not a good feeling. And then, of course, as you said, the court storm afterwards, it was a little was tough. But hey, this is Taylor Swift Day. It's a Saturday afternoon. I don't know. Maybe
do you and I have to dress up like Taylor Swift? Do we have to know Taylor Swift songs? Is there going to be trivia? What's the setup Saturday?
Well,
Swift Day.
They don't care about me because I'm sitting up in the press box, but for you being on the floor, you're supposed to dress like Ken.
Okay.
Even though that's Barbie, but you're supposed to. No, but no, I don't know what it means. I think it's just it's part of the allure these days, and good for them. I'm happy for all of them for thinking that way. So this will be another sold out game. Nebraska, which is I'm sure that I won't go into the Nebraska type stuff. I have enough issues there, but that should be entertaining nevertheless. And I would expect them to bounce back in a pretty dominant way, personally.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that's one of those spots where you're like, Nebraska, you're like, oh man, we got to go to Iowa after they're coming off a loss.
Yeah.
And they've had all week to prepare. That's not a good setup. So
yeah,
heavy favorite Iowa on Saturday. Enjoy it. Get your Taylor Swift on if you're going to the game. All that good stuff. Another one. We're trying to hit these quick here because we're running a little bit longer. It's as normally happens. I'm a day late and $1 short. I left a little early to get dog food on Saturday to go to Carver Hawkeye Arena for the Iowa-Purdue men's game. And en route, Kaden Proctor committed to Iowa or announced his commitment. So I get to the arena and I see Scott over by the media row, and I'm like, yeah, Kaden Proctor's supposed to be here. Maybe he'll commit today. And Scott's like, he already did. I'm like, oh. And then I look over and see him, and he's down with the students that are there on the floor. He's chest bumping, he's high-fiving, having the time of his life. The kid looked happy. And to me, that's the most important thing of this whole development, is that he looks like he's where he wants to be. It didn't seem like, Alabama maybe met what he thought it was going to be, and that happens. And he went through the process. He spent a year of college football. He knows what he knew better what he was looking for, and it was right here 2 hours from his home. And now he's home, and certainly a big boost for Iowa's offensive line, to say the least.
No question. I think, first of all, let's put yourself in his size 20 shoes or whatever they are.
It's a big kid.
I know, he's massive. And you look at it and you go, how many times have we seen this, Rob, where somebody graduates high school, they go away, and then at semester or the next year, they come back closer to home? I mean, it's at least 50-50. I mean, our good friend, Tom Caker, his son went to Arizona State, and then he decided he wanted to go to meteorology school, and now is a couple hours away from his home. And I think it happens so often. I mean, 50-50 is probably given it is generous.
Yeah.
And so that's just the personal level. You look at the football part of it. I mean, hell, he started 14 games of left tackle in the SEC for the most dominant program in the country for the last 15 years, and as a true freshman. So you're getting somebody who's already been through the wars that walks in the door, and we already knew how talented he was when he left, but now he's got a lot of seasoned experience to go along with that. But he looked happy, he looked relaxed. He's in an environment now where if he struggles, like at Alabama, they were pretty hard on him, the fans, because their expectation is, I don't care if you're a freshman or not, you're going to go out and perform. And he struggled especially early on, and now it's Here I don't even think he was sitting with players. If I was looking, I mean, where he was kind of on the opposite side of kind of the band and everything. And
He did have, I think Marco was there, and I saw Trevor Lauk. He was sitting with some of the guys that that he got to know, like we talked about last week when we knew he was going in the portal. The guys he, built relationships with when he was being recruited by Iowa. I know Trevor was really disappointed when Kaden decided to go to Alabama. So it looked like those guys were happy to have him back.
Yeah, and I didn't see him with them at that time. I mean, he might have been with some Southeast Polk guys or something, but or friends from that area. And that's what it's all about, because you grew up 2 hours away, and there are people that that have gone to this school, and now his mom and his family are nearby, and mom can come over if he misses her. Hey, let's just go out to lunch today, or I want to go home for a weekend. Do catch up on laundry and just kind of hang out at home. Now he can do all of that, and he did grow up an Iowa fan. He grew up wanting. Now I don't know if I wonder if Trevor will give him 74. I imagine he probably will, but he'll probably owe him something now that with the NIL.
There's definitely going to be some type of negotiation there.
Yeah, so I don't know if it's give him a ride and whatever he gets or what, but and then you look at what this does for Iowa football. It's a huge boost to this offensive line. Even the Iowa offensive line was returning every single returning starter from week 1. But and a big but at that. You put him in at left tackle and you reshuffle the line, it gets significantly better, because I think Mason is, when he's healthy, has potential to play the next level inside at guard. Might want to put him there. And then Connor Colby, I think, was a pretty good player for the most part. I think Jennings Dunker is a player who's ascending. Logan Jones had been injured late in the year, but I think he's got potential. And excuse me. So overall, and then then you got a guy like Nick DeYoung and Tyler Ellsbury and Bo Stevens when he's healthy. You've got all these guys. Now you're like, your depth is completely different. And
I added up those 8 guys, Scott, the most experienced guys, 169 starts for the top 8.
Wow.
College starts. That's if they don't take a huge step forward this year, I don't know.
Yeah. And then you throw on Luke Lachey and Addison Ostrenga. Lachey has the potential to be the best tight end in the country this year. Addison Ostrenga tied for the team lead in receptions. You look at the running backs. I think they're all talented. There were some issues, I think, with blocking. To put it but then again, there was issues with the passing game, which was so deep that we could spend all day on that one too. It's kind of like the Carver situation, but when you put together a quality offensive line with an NFL caliber left tackle, kind of like Alaric Jackson, if you have that kind of a player there, then you can start running zone again and be effective at that. And if you can do that and then mix in your counters, which Iowa's been pretty good at as well, then you're talking about a different kind of running game. And if you can pass off of that, this offense will be much better. And it's all because of one person. That's the weird thing. It's a trickle down effect. Mason, I think, is one of the best 5 linemen, but he's probably a better guard than he is left tackle. He's just kind of had to play left tackle because they've been, haven't had anybody at that position. This makes him a better pro prospect. And then you look at your guards and go, wow, that's not bad. Having Mason Richmond and Connor Colby, who might have been your 2 best.
It may be the biggest from a physical size standpoint that Kirk's had.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody but Jones is over 300, right?
Yeah. They've gotten bigger.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think Tyler Ellsbury played really well when he was in there. I thought he probably played better than Jones, I thought. Now Jones is more injured and everything like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But but then there's the questions that we all have, and they're going to be answered over time. They're up to 92 scholarships, and I would expect them to probably try to look at another quarterback or a wide receiver or something in the portal, and so they already have to trim 7. At some point maybe it might be as many as 9. Now, we've gone over the depth chart quite a bit, but there's there are probably 3 or 4 people that the medical question is going to come up after spring ball. There's going to be 1 or 2 that says, what, I'm just not. I don't know. Maybe I'm not going to be able to play. People are passing me up, or I just want to get a chance to be the guy. So I don't think it'll be too difficult to get down there, but there might be a scholarship or 2 that needs to have that really strong conversation.
Yep, and it can be good for both parties. Congrats to Brendan Diaz Fernandez. He found a new home at Central Michigan. Wish him the best. He got passed over, wasn't able to break through here. Decided to let me go somewhere else, and we'll see we see those situations all the time, and we're going to see them again. Roster management these days are just it's as fluid as it's ever been, and that's not going back. So,
question on him: does he still attending classes at Iowa?
Brendan?
Yeah,
I don't know. What makes you ask? Did you see him?
Well, no, I saw his commitment, and this is one thing I'm wondering. Like Deontay Vines, I don't know if he's anywhere else either. And I just kind of wonder, are they just attending classes at Iowa? And are they going to graduate and then are they going to move on? Or because I wonder about semester and starting classes, all that sort of thing.
It's a good question. I mean, we saw that with Rusty Feth, right? He had to finish at Miami before he got here. So, yeah, I mean.
Nick Jackson.
Yeah, Nick Jackson. It's complicated, right? You actually do have to go to school. You actually do have to go to classes. Whether you're at your old school or your new school, you still have to matriculate, right? So, all right, Scott, let's wrap up. I apologize to folks for not giving this more time because I know it's a big story, but I have a feeling we're going to talk about this more moving forward, and that is the gambling investigation into Iowa and Iowa State. You're writing about this. You attended the Tom Brand's press conference yesterday. It went differently than I thought it would go, Scott. I thought he would be more receptive to the question, but he seemed to be more resentful that it took this long for the story to come out. And for those that don't know, I'm not going to go into great detail because I don't know it in great detail, but basically it was a whistleblower that brought this to light. And that's why it came out. It wasn't the fault of the media for not reporting on it. And the people that say that people weren't trying to report on it are not informed because people have been trying to dig into this for a while. And this, it took something from the inside to make it come out.
Wow.
And you and I were talking about this at the basketball game last night a little bit. I get it. And I give Tom a little bit of a mulligan because he has a personal connection to this because his nephew Nelson was affected by it. But I was surprised by his reaction to your questions yesterday.
Yeah, I was too. And here's where how things came about. Last Friday, there were depositions in the Isaiah Lee trial coming up. And in those depositions, you had people with the Division of Criminal Investigation relaying the groundwork of how this all came about. And you had one, Mark Ludwig with the DCI, who was the one who initially interviewed Isaiah Lee, the Iowa State defensive tackle, and told him, look, we're not coming after you. We just want to get some information, in regards to like the company. So he gave him all this stuff, and then he came back and the special agent in charge said, good, thanks for getting the confession. And then he backed off. Brian Sanger, the special agent, under oath. This is, I can't just walk to these guys and they're not going to just tell me. I mean, I've covered police, 25 years ago. That was my job. It was not sports, but police. And to get anything out of officers, especially about something like this, it's either impossible or next to impossible. Let's put it that way. And it had to come out under oath in a deposition because otherwise they're going to say no comment. That's all I've really gotten out of this. And
Yeah.
and you know, the interest has always been there. The reporting has been there. It's just now when they have to tell the truth and everything about it is when the whole story is coming out. It's coming out. I don't know what the deal is about whether, you know, and Tom's like, you know, we didn't put in the work and we didn't do all that. You know, we got a lot of shit to do. And, you know, and all of the news outlets that all these guys poo-poo all the time, you know, that we're evil media and poor journalism and stuff. And you look at the Des Moines Register and hell, the Press Citizen and Ames Tribune are barely there. And all these outlets now are cut in half or 2/3 from what they were even 10 years ago.
Look at your hometown paper.
Well, exactly. I mean, before Gatehouse bought them, they were at 24 full-timers. Then they went down to 3. So you have these, there's no way to put forth those resources. And sure, okay, I could have spent all my summer, fall, and part of my winter going into this and still not getting that same information because I don't have subpoena power. I can't sit there and make them take an oath while I ask them these questions. Whereas an attorney who's paid for it, who makes the police officer stand there with his hand on the Bible and say these things, has all that power to do it. It's coming out. It's showing it out. It's just what would have, if this would have happened in November, it wouldn't have changed a damn thing with the NCAA. So, yeah, it's interesting. I'm not bitter about it, but I also, you know, I've gotten a lot of tweets from people. It's like the damn media would just do its job. Well, okay, well, I cannot report on the football. I cannot report on the other stuff. I could just report on this and still not get anywhere near as much information as what got in a court of law last Friday. And this is all coming out, but it's not going to matter. I mean, the NCAA is not going to turn it in. It's kind of like, I used this analogy last night. It's like, let's say the cops break in your house when you're a teenager and they find weed in your drawer, and then they arrest you.
That would never happen at my house.
Your current one or your former one?
Either or.
Yeah. Well, let's say that
for the sake of argument.
Yeah, for the sake of argument, that they came into my house when I was a teenager and they found weed in my drawer, and then they were arresting me, and then it's like I got to go to my parents and tell them that I got arrested, and then all of a sudden they realize, you know, after a while, it's like, yeah, they really shouldn't have done that. You know, they had no reason to be there. There's no probable cause, so they drop all the charges. That doesn't mean your parents can say, well, since we wouldn't have known because they were in there for improper procedure, that we won't do anything. No, they're still going to ground your ass.
Yeah,
and that's kind of what's happening with the NCAA. You know, it's like, hey, you still gambled, you still turned yourselves in, and then people are like, well, why did they turn themselves in? Because if they didn't, they would have gotten destroyed. Let's put it that way. The NCAA found out there's a gambling situation in Iowa and Iowa State, and all these, you know, every single win would have been dropped. They would have had lack of institutional control at the league level. So it sucks, but that's just the way it is. Anyway, I'm going on too long.
No, I think it's important that you explain the situation, that, because I get it. We talked about it earlier. People act on emotion, especially on social media, and instead of taking the time to actually look at the facts of the situation and how this came out. And again, I guess I could say I'm a little disappointed in Tom that he took that approach with you. In this business, we're used to that. We're used to getting pushback, and comes with the territory. You have to ask the questions. Scott's got a folder of tough questions that he has to ask. And to me, it's the irony and the humor in this is that people complain about the media, crooked media not asking the tough questions, doing their job. But then they don't support the media for them to do the job. So I don't know. It's all kind of tangled up. I think it's good that this information is out there, that the obtaining of information was shady. But again, like you said, the information that was gathered showed improprieties, and you can't put that toothpaste back in the tube.
Yeah, and there's no way Iowa could have not turned it over to the NCAA.
Right.
I mean, that's just that was a step that they cannot do. I mean, and it sucks for Noah Shannon.
Yeah.
It sucks for some of the, for Keaton Anthony. I mean, of all these, wrestling's certainly got a case, and Iowa State football certainly had a case, but Iowa baseball may have gotten screwed worse than anybody because it happened right at the end of the year. And you take an All-American out of that lineup that went to regionals and made it to basically the regional final, and maybe he goes out there and throws an inning, saves them, one of the losses, and then so Rick Heller might have had the biggest beef here, and because at least Iowa wrestling got to go to the portal, and grab some really good wrestlers. Now there's some others that are on the sidelines, including Nelson Brands and Tony Cassiope, and those are tough, but Kobe, but that it's not my fault. I have written a ton of stories about it. I blew my freaking summer. How many times are we sitting there talking and speculating about this, Rob? So I got some information from a police officer back in the fall, and it sounded like it was something like this, but he wasn't the one in charge. It wasn't even affected with DCI. He was just passing along hearsay, and we look into it. And I mean, even the other day I talked to DCI and had a quote, and it's like, well, we're just not going to comment, until that's what you get.
Yep. We're not ongoing litigation. We can't talk. So, I mean, and the reason nothing was reported is because thankfully journalists are responsible enough not to put information out there, like you talking to a police officer that has some insight, but it's more hearsay. You can't report on that. Yeah. And Tom knows that.
Yeah. You can't just be it can't just be your convenience, for these types of issues. You can't say, back the blue 100%, and then, but not in this situation because I'm the one getting screwed here, and I don't want to get into that political argument, but just like with journalists, you can't be the evil media and then, well, why aren't you guys helping me out? It just doesn't work that way, and it's unfortunate. And like Kevin Dresser was much more open about the situation, and said, I think these guys are going to get some big checks, and he's right. But I was a little disappointed in Tom's discussion, and I know that a lot of people at Iowa were like, we need to look into this.
Yeah, and obviously the story is not over yet. We'll see how this all plays out, and we'll talk about it down the line as well. And we'll get more into, once we get back into football talk towards the spring, we'll talk more about, the Kaden Proctor edition. And hopefully this time next week, Scott, we can talk about the offensive coordinator and why it's a good hire and why it's a bad hire and why it took so long and all that happy horse shit. We can come back and talk about that next week. How's that sound?
I hope, man. I don't know how much longer I can take you to this.
Can you see me right now?
Yes.
Okay. Because I can't see anything. Since we came back from break, I cannot see anything on my computer screen. It's completely black, and I've been trying to monkey with it to get it back. But I was like, well, he obviously can see me because we're continuing to have a conversation here. But I haven't seen you in like 45 minutes.
Okay. So you didn't see me put my thumb over the Ask Tough Questions folder, huh?
No, I didn't. But in my mind, I'm thinking he's going to grab the folder if I bring this up. So I pictured it in my mind, even though I can't freaking see it on my computer. I don't know what's going on here, but I'm not going to be able to shut this podcast off without shutting off my computer. This is very professional, I'm sure, for the people watching this on YouTube. So I'm actually going to have to shut down my computer to shut our podcast off. So I'm going to say goodbye to you now as we're saying goodbye to the listeners, because I'm in a technical cage here. I'm in technical jail, and I don't have an IT person here to help me out, so I'm stuck. That's what you get for working from home. But I want to thank our sponsors. I want to thank all you folks for listening. Enjoyed the podcast. We'll be back next week, hopefully, to talk about an offensive coordinator hire, catch up on basketball, wrestling, all that good stuff. So thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you to our sponsors. And Scott and I will talk to you next week. Say goodbye, Scott.
Goodbye, Scott.
Right.
So we can't have side talk here. I got to shut off, bud.
All right.
See ya.
Say goodbye. Bye.
Is this going to